Our plan to walk the Francesco Way from Florence to Assisi gets washed out. Our start coincided with a big weather event in Tuscany and the Emilia-Romagn region, causing widespread flooding that affected over 6 million people. Did we make it through safely? Keep watching to find out. This is a walk back in time between Florence and Assisi in Italy, exploring St Francis of Assisi's formative wanderings. First, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Too many, you have to walk the whole way, crawling if needed, for the walk pilgrimage to count. As one walker said, I have to do a long walk as it takes 10 to 14 days for all the stuff in my usually busy life to fall off. Then I'm calm and in a place to benefit. As we have only 12 days for the walk, we will take a different approach. Going slow and hearing other people's experiences and seeing a little of their daily life, being open to personal change and even being prepared to be quiet and listen for God to speak to you is all part of the Way of St Francis journey. As a 70-plus-year-old who daily gives thanks for his mobility, I have nothing to prove and have planned some bus days to achieve our goal. But sometimes even the best planning gets turned upside down. We face two problems. First, this weather bomb is rolling in, with daily severe weather alerts being issued by the Italian Air Force. Second, COVID reared its head, and 6 weeks before starting our walk, we both got COVID. And in my case, it was 5 weeks before I got my energy back. So all our fitness preparations slid backwards, and we are walking without our usual fitness and stamina. Day 0. The night before leaving Florence, we popped over to the Basilica de Santa Croce to get our first stamp on our Credenziale del Pellegrino, or pilgrim passport. The piazza in front of the Basilica was full of football fans, ringed with a police cordon. We had walked into a football final between Florence and Basel teams in the European Cup. The Florence fans were here to be bussed out to the stadium. Trouble was expected, so most of the police were in full riot gear, and the majority of their cars and vans were armoured up, looking more like they were heading off to the Ukraine. Day 1. So, early next morning, we walked down to the Arno River and we headed upstream towards Pontecerve. Unfortunately, the early tour buses had arrived, so we first had to navigate fighting tourists, all keen to follow their tour leader's flag. The sky rumbled with thunder all day, along with the occasional flash of lightning, finally becoming heavy rain at 1 p.m. This walk is far from flat, but just one hill today, and it was a gut buster. We ended up on top when the lightning was most active, which wasn't a good feeling, especially carrying metal walking poles, which felt like we were carrying lightning rods. Then we dropped down even steeper grades, all through very picturesque olive groves. We jumped onto a local bus for the last few kilometres, resulting in a slightly wet but not drenched arrival at our B&B in Pontecerve. Day 2. We leave the River Arno today and head up over a 1,050 metre pass in the Ardennes Mountains at Consuma. So it was climbing all day, mostly gradual. Walking along ridge tops, you get an incredible view down into the surrounding valleys full of olive groves, vineyards and enchanting old farm buildings. As we walk through the buildings close to the trail, we come across special features, wells, shrines, gardens, etc. They certainly are very picturesque, and thousands of years of history rolled up in some of these features. Due to all the rain, we also met some special glutinous mud, peculiar to this area. It clings to our shoes and forms big heavy clumps. This can make progress rather treacherous, and a couple of times we needed to help each other to extract a foot or two out of this mire. It was surprising to see so many deer tracks on the trail today, especially given its proximity to Florence. This would become a daily experience now till Assisi. While the forest is obviously full of them, and daily we saw tracks, didn't see any live deer. But at dinner that night we met a couple of German cyclists riding the Florence, Assisi, Rome route, and he was telling me he heard a bear in the forest a few kilometres back. They are very rare, but apparently the quiet of COVID times has seen an increase of them in this area. Heavy rain made this day's finish by bus a necessity also. As we waited for it under the veranda of a bar, it closed for siesta, as is the common practice. But fortunately, the helpful owner left chairs on the street for us, which was much appreciated. So we sat under the veranda in this downpour. Some think we aren't proper pilgrims catching buses, but consider this. Back in the day, seniors like us would have been put on donkeys to get through these extreme conditions. So isn't a bus just a modern day donkey? At the end of the day, we walked in the rain up to our accommodation, a country hotel that looked rather abandoned, but while still 30 metres away, the front door swings open. An enthusiastic welcome was heard to ring out. At first we wondered what we'd got ourselves into, but it was clean, warm, and the staff welcoming and helpful. It was a bit like an Italian Fawlty Towers, except our Basil wasn't as rude, just overactive like the Energizer Bunny. So we enjoyed our stay at Hotel Morante. Day 3. Due to the high water levels, which made river crossings impossible or dangerous, we road walked part of the day. It was quite busy and the closeness of the traffic was quite unnerving. During the day we met a delightful German lady from Cologne, doing a solo walk from Florence to Rome, who also had to bus due to the conditions. Day 4 was a leap day for us by train and bus to Ciusa della Verna, bypassing 3 days to set us up for the last 120 kilometres to Assisi. Above this small town is the large Franciscan sanctuary, La Verna, which we climbed up to and explored. Day 5 coincided with the big floods and became an evacuation day for us, along with a lot of other pilgrims. We did a big loop by bus out of the mountains and then by train down to Gubbio, a charming hillside town full of character, traditions and old buildings. Day 6 and 7 in Gubbio we spent relaxing and exploring this amazing old hillside walled town full of intriguing lanes and streets, churches, civic buildings and homes. The day before we arrived was the Sierra La Festa. This local tradition is Italy's most ancient celebration, a combined festival and race between 3 passionately supported local teams. It goes all day and attracts up to 100,000 people to watch, participate and enjoy. It's rather a full-on event with rules for the tourists to follow that include: do not complain about being shoved, it will happen. Please concentrate on pulling any fallen person out of danger. New Zealand's risk-averse health and safety officials would have had heart attacks on the spot. But it's interesting, our system, which dumbs down personal initiative, results in 30% more work deaths per thousand each year than Italy's more laid-back approach does. But I digress. Back to Gubbio. It would have to be my favourite Italian village. I will aim to do a YouTube just on it in the future. So day 8 saw us up early and walking out of this fiesta flag-decorated city and across the valley heading uphill to Tuscany for the night. High water on some river crossings saw us battling traffic on the sealed roads again. I must say, despite our frazzled nerves, most Italian drivers gave us a generous amount of space as they passed. But you have narrow roads, so if traffic is coming from both directions, it is walker beware. Arrived in the rain to discover that the Agriturismo check-in was still an hour away. By the opening time, there were a dozen or so pilgrims perched on all sorts of impromptu seats trying to get out of the rain. It was cold, and a few negative comments were expressed in the dining room that night. When the owner was asked about the heating, their flat response was, "We can't start the boiler this late in the season." Despite the warm staff, it proved to be a cold stay. And day 9 saw us heading downhill towards the dam. A lovely, easy walk along farm tracks soon gave way to a horrific, muddy downhill section. We travelled 1.5 kilometres in 3 hours. We can't say we walked, as more time was spent swinging or sliding, including my trooper of a wife who at times was progressing on her backside. That night we discovered it was all unnecessary, as German and Italian guidebooks all advised taking nearby sealed roads if there had been raining, let alone a weather bomb saturating the area. Our English guidebook, which we were generally happy with, let us down when walking in the wet. It continued to rain during the day, but much lighter now. However, we still both looked like mud scarecrows when we walked into wedding celebrations at Agriturismo al Piopol, just past Val Fabrica, to night's accommodation. This would be our pick of the accommodation we experienced. The heaters worked, so we could dry things as well as get warm. Our room turned out to be a 5-roomed cottage. Complete with an 8-foot-long sword. However, it was never explained what we should use it for, whether in defence of our property or theirs. The owner, Mattai, was rather a charismatic fella, known by all as very warm, busy and capable, as well as the wedding, numerous guests staying and dining. That night, a boisterous 8-year-old birthday party was also held in the restaurant. Day 9 was our final walking day, and the first day in 12 that we didn't use our wet weather gear. Gravel roads, as per our guidebook, were at times a sea of mud with occasional rocks. Fortunately, I think it was uphill, so no sliding today, just slithering backwards at times. This mud was at times so deep that if you weren't careful you could sink in way past your ankles. As well as pilgrim and deer tracks in the mud, we come across some large bear footprints. That's bear as in no shoes, which intrigued us until after lunch. We talked to a couple of US walkers who had clean shoes on, but talked about all the mud. They turned out to be the barefoot walkers. It keeps your shoes clean, was their reasoning. And the grip is good, you can dig your toes in. So the day finished with the zigzag climb up into Assisi. We had been looking forward to walking into this amazing place. Fortunately, we stayed for 2 nights, as our arrival coincided with the arrival of a 10,000 plus people peace march, which created pedestrian gridlock in Assisi. Yes, we made it despite the worst that the weather and COVID could throw at us, and despite all this, we enjoyed it, learnt things, and met some really interesting people. Most appear to have a real connection with the simple and sincere ways of St Francis. This is Dudley Moore saying thanks again for watching Remote Places, New Zealand, and feel free to forward the link to friends that may enjoy this video.